Thinking, I was driving down the road not long ago and I saw somebody on the back of their car, they had a bumper sticker that said, "Not all who wander are lost." And I had to think about that for a minute because I kind of thought to myself, I kind of think they are. Do you ever wake up in the morning and say, "I think just today I'll just wander around all day"? You ever thought about that? You ever did that? No, we usually wake up and we kind of know what point A and point B and point C is going to be in our day, right? But I kind of think that people who just wander all around with no purpose and no real objective are lost, don't you?
Yes.
You know, our God is a God of order. He doesn't have us just wandering around. And in the spiritual world, the only time I can think that people who were wandering weren't lost was the Israelites. And they weren't actually wandering. Do you think that the Israelites were aimlessly wandering around the desert? No, they were following a pillar of cloud by day, and they stopped. There was a pillar of fire. But that pillar of cloud knew where it was going every day, didn't it?
Yes.
So they weren't aimlessly wandering. There was an objective every day that God had for them. And as we've been studying our Sabbath school lesson, it was lesson after lesson after lesson, but they were, as we determined today, stiff-necked. They got the correction, the adjustment, right? And then how much longer before their neck was stiff again? And that God would take them from point A to point B for another adjustment, and they wouldn't get the adjustment, would they? But they weren't aimlessly wandering. You know, I want to open our Bibles this morning to John chapter 10, our key text. John chapter 10 and verse 16. John chapter 10, verse 16. The only times I can remember myself wandering around, I was lost. You ever been out in the wilderness and you're just walking and walking and walking and you don't know if you're getting home or not? What do we call that? Lost. The only time we're not lost is when we know our objective, right? So if we don't have an objective, what are we? Lost. Right? John chapter 10, verse 16. Notice what Jesus said. "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." We're going to analyze this a little bit this morning. Jesus in this verse is saying that he has sheep, and what is he trying to do with those sheep? Get them to point B. They're wandering, they've left point A, but they haven't made it to point B. Point B is what, according to this verse? The fold. Now, what is the fold? When we're talking about the fold, what do we mean? You know, the Faith I Live By, page 280, paragraph 2, simple sentence. Faith I Live By, page 280, paragraph 2. "The church of Christ is very precious in his sight. It is the case that contains his jewels, the fold which encloses his flock." So another word for fold is what?
Church.
Is it church or his church? We're going to have to refine this a little bit, right? In Signs of the Times, I want you to notice this, October 23rd, 1879. Signs of the Times. And this is paragraph 9. It says that in the ministry of Christ and his apostles, those who were converted to the truth were brought into church relationship. And every stray, lost sheep was found and brought to the fold of the church. Now, in this verse, it says the church. Why in this statement? Why can it say the church in this statement? Why do you think in the other statement it says his church, and in this statement it says the church? Why the difference? Why the contextual difference? I'm giving you a clue. Contextual meaning the context. What time are we talking about here? In the time of the apostles, how many churches were there that claimed to be Christ's church? One. So they were brought to the church. But today, how many churches are there that claim to be Christ's church? Thousands. And so the statement for us today says his flock, his church. There's a difference then, isn't there? There's a difference. So we need to understand that when Christ is saying this in John chapter 10, verse 16, notice it says, "And other sheep I have which are not of this church, them I must also bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there will be one church and one shepherd." Correct? So even then, the plan was for how many churches? One. And today is the plan for how many churches? One. One church. Does this mean then that Christ has other sheep that are outside of his church? Yes. Yes. So let's view this board as the world. The board is the world. Okay? The circle is the fold, or be specific. His church. Thank you. Thank you. His church. So inside his church, what does he have? People. Inside the fold, there are sheep. Right? Outside the fold, there are sheep. What kind of sheep? Right? Some are his, some are not. Right? But there's still sheep out there, right? So out here in the world, what do we have? X's and O's, right? Now, do you think there's more X's than O's? That's another study. That's another study, right? But understanding the concept here, what is Christ then? What is his objective? What has been the objective from the beginning? To get the X's into the circle. Right? We'll simplify. To get the X's into the circle, which means to what? Get his sheep into his fold. Now, I like what somebody said. What are these sheep doing out here? If they're not walking towards this fold, what are they doing out here? And if they're wandering, they're lost sheep. They need to be brought home, right? We'll look at a few reasons why, but that's the simplicity of the gospel, yes? So there are other sheep out there, so if they're not God's sheep, who owns those sheep? We'll get into that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But in Desire of Ages, page 483, Desire of Ages, page 483, paragraph 4. It says here, and it's referring to John 10:16. It says, Jesus thought upon the souls all over the earth who were misled by false shepherds, those whom he longed to gather as the sheep of his pasture were scattered among wolves. So we have other sheep, and what else do we have? What symbol am I going to use for them? We can use a triangle. How about that? What is the triangle? What is the triangle always trying to do to the sheep? Destroy them, eat them, right? And it says here that he said, other sheep I have, etc., which are not of this fold, them I must also bring. So this is in direct reference. So when Jesus looked out here, what did he see? He saw his sheep. All of these that were being confused and told to wander by false shepherds or wolves, right? So what now, does this scenario become a little more urgent? Before, they're just wandering. You can wander aimlessly forever and it's not a problem, right? But what about if you're wanderously, aimlessly, and now there's wolves trying to get you? Is that a problem? So have you ever been lost in the woods and wandered kind of aimlessly? And you were okay until you started thinking about what's going to happen if the bears come around and the wolves come around and we need to get out of the woods a little quicker now. And what else makes you move a little faster when you're in the woods and you're lost? Night's coming. The darkness is coming. So what's coming upon this earth? We have all this going on right now, don't we? And what did Jesus think when he looked out there at all the people? They have to get brought into the fold. So obviously there is some kind of safety in that fold, right? Notice the statement in Early Writings, page 261. Early Writings, 261, paragraph 1. I saw that God has honest children among the nominal Adventists and the fallen churches. And before the plague shall be poured out, ministers and people will all be called out from these churches and will gladly receive the truth. When they're called out from these churches, where will they go? To this fold, right? And I want you to notice a distinction. Do you ever analyze when you read? Do you analyze details like I mentioned before? Why the church in that statement and his church in the other statement? Do you ever analyze while you're reading and say, wonder why God uses those words right there? You need to, because it's very important. Did you notice what this statement said? That God has honest children where? Among the nominal Adventists and the fallen churches. Why does God not categorize the nominal Adventists with fallen churches? Why aren't they just all lost people? Because there's this distinction to be made. And at the end of time, where is God going to call his honest people from? From the fallen churches and from nominal Adventists. So can his fold be a nominal Adventist fold? Can that be his fold? No, he's going to be calling out from there. I'm just analyzing the statement. Do you ever analyze? We should analyze, right? Because sometimes what's not said is more important than what is said. Right? So, who are these sheep then that are out there? They're Jesus' sheep, right? Jesus has these sheep, but there's other sheep out there that are not his. Right? Right? And there's wolves out there. Now, do we know the difference? Do we know the difference? No, I want you to notice what the statement says. Read it again. John chapter 10, verse 16. Analyzation. Very important. And other sheep I have which are not this fold, them also I must bring. Who? He will bring. And they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. So how do we determine whose sheep are whose? Do we determine that? What's the determining factor? They hear his voice. What's our job then? What's our only job? Is to be his voice. That's our only job. Our job is not to judge who is who and what is what and all that. Our job is just to be his voice. Right? Because who's going to bring them? He is. And what does he ask us to do? Just be his voice. That's it. Right? Do you save anybody? Do you go out there and judge who are going to be God's children and who aren't, and who to even speak to? Who does that? Whose business is that? The Holy Spirit, right? That's God's job. Our job is simply to be his voice. So if this is the scenario, and there's all these wolves and all this wandering and this potentially lost condition and all this out there, what then is the purpose of being in here? Safety, protection. Exactly. Acts of the Apostles, page 11, paragraph 2. Acts of the Apostles, page 11, paragraph 2. The church, or what? Fold, is God's fortress, his city of refuge, which he holds in a revolted world. So have you ever had that study on the city of refuge? If you haven't, please go back. Try to study ancient Israel about when they established the cities of refuge and what they were for. Someday we can have that other study here again. But the city of refuge, which he holds in a revolted world. So do you remember what song I started with this morning? Or what song did we start with? You remember the hymn we sang? It was 7, it's 26, like 19 minutes ago. Jesus, keep me near the cross. What has God given us to help keep us near the cross? His church. What does the church do? It helps to keep you near the cross, doesn't it? Because outside of it and away from it, do you hear a lot about the cross? Are you close to the cross if you're out here? That's why I picked that song. We talked about keep me near the cross. We want all these things. Dear Lord, we get all these blessings and all this. We want to stay near the cross. But do we take advantage of what He gives us to be near the cross? Which the main thing He's given us is what? The church. His city of refuge, which He holds in what kind of world? A revolted world. Is the world revolted out there? Absolutely. Where's your safety? Church. Church. You know, there's another analogy that the Bible uses. Let's go to Colossians chapter 1, verse 18. Colossians chapter 1 and verse 18. Notice this. And He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things He might have the preeminence. Of course, we're speaking of Christ. And Christ is the head of the body, which is what? The church. So another analogy used for church is the body, with Christ being the head, correct? So education. Education, page 268, paragraph 5. Notice this statement here. Education, 268, paragraph 5. Very close and sacred is the relation between Christ and His church. He, the bridegroom, and the church, the bride. He, the head, the church, the body. I want to ask you, do you have a very close connection between your head and your body? Is there a very close connection between the two? What happens if we separated your head from your body?
No life.
No life at all. And what happens if your head is sick? What happens to the rest of the body?
It's sick.
It's sick. How many of you have ever had a headache? It's even hard to function with anything else to do. How about concentration and thought, or even getting up and doing something? How about depression? How does that affect the body? You know, I never understood, really, until I learned more, why depressed people sleep all the time. You'd think after a while your body would say, I've had enough. Have you ever slept enough where you finally said, I just can't lay in bed anymore? Depressed people don't do that. They would lay in bed every day, all day, for weeks. Right? Then what happens to the body? It deteriorates more and more, so the issues more. So there's a very close connection between your head and your body. How close do you think the connection is between Christ and His church then? If you are part of the body, can you function without Christ? So that means that you as the body are also the church, right? Can the church function if it separates itself from Christ? Can the Christian function if he separates himself from the church? Because where's the head attached? To the church. Right? Because notice what else it says. Connection with Christ then involves connection with His church. You can't truly say that you are a Christian 100% if you're not connected to His church. And I didn't use the word a church. Right? Will anyone be sanctified without being connected to Christ's church? I know I just asked you a controversial question. Because you know what I'm saying. That Christians who are not connected to His church will not be sanctified. True or false? What is sanctification? The process of becoming perfected. Can you become perfected with false doctrine? It's impossible to be perfectly perfected if you hold false doctrine, because you're striving for what? An imperfect standard. If the doctrine's false, the sanctification will be false. Am I true or false? It's true. So it behooves us to find out where the complete system of truth is. What am I quoting when I say that? Jesus Christ is the complete system of truth. So if I'm in an erroneous system, am I becoming like Jesus Christ? No, I'm becoming like whatever system that is that was established there, because it wasn't established by God. Yes or no? How many folds did Jesus say he was trying to have? One. Let's go back to the body. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 27 and 28. First Corinthians chapter 12, verses 27 and 28. Now ye are the body of Christ, and members in particular. And God has set some in the church, first apostles, secondarily prophets, thirdly teachers, after that miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, governments, diversities of tongues. So notice all the different things, all the different positions that God has placed in the church. One of them I want to examine just right now is governments. We would like to have apostles and prophets and teachers, but we don't all like government. Because what is government? Government, management or administration of an organization, a business, or an institution. It comes from the Greek word, I'm not even going to try to say it, but means directorship or pilotage or government in the church. It's the actual word that means to guide and direct the church. God will have government in His church. Government is a system of organization. So, will God's church be organized? Yes. So does that mean that I can go out here and do whatever I want and I can claim to be part of God's church, but I'm out here doing whatever I want? Or in a system that's erroneous and I can still claim to be in God's church? Is it possible? You can claim it, but it doesn't make it truth, right? It doesn't make it truth. In Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13, how long will God have government in His church? Ephesians chapter 4, 11 through 13. And He gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers. The same list as before, it just didn't mention governments. Doesn't mean it's not here anymore, right? For what? For the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Let's stop for a minute. Perfecting of the saints. Can the saints become perfect in a false system? No. We already established that, right? So the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till when? Till we all come in the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. You see, we all have to become like that. Right? Yes or no?
Yes.
It's not just relying on His merit to overcome our deficiencies, but we have to overcome our deficiencies. Yes or no? Yes, we have to come, what does it say here? The exact words, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. In other words, as far as a human being can become like Christ, we must become. Yes? That's the perfecting of the saints. Is that going to happen, number one, if you have false doctrine?
No.
Is that going to happen, number two, if you're aimlessly wandering?
No.
Is that going to happen if you're in a false system or without government? Because what does government do for you? It leads you, it helps you, right? It helps the perfecting of the saints. It helps the ministry. It helps edify the body of Christ. I'm going to go back to education, page 268 again. Education, page 268, paragraph 4. Listen to this one. Another obligation too often lightly regarded. Now, I wonder why this obligation is so lightly regarded, but if you think about it, you'll know, because human nature lightly regards this obligation. One that to the youth awakened to the claims of Christ needs to be made plain is the obligation of church relationship. The what of church relationship? What is an obligation? A requirement. Not optional. If you want to become perfected, if you want to come up to the full measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, you must accept the obligation of church relationship. Why does it specify youth? I mean, human nature, this obligation is often lightly regarded by humans, period. But why does it have to be more emphasis on youth? Because it's time to grow up. When you claim to be a Christian, now you must become mature. Right? You must fulfill your obligations. Isn't that what maturity is? We've been explaining maturity to some young people recently. What is maturity? Because I can grow a beard? Well, I'm 54 and I still can't. Does that mean I'm immature? No, there's other reasons why I'm immature. It's not because I can't grow a beard. Right? Maturity means what? If I ask you, what is the quick definition? Give me definition of maturity. Short and concise. Go ahead. Be responsible without being told. Fulfill your obligations without being told. That's maturity, right? I don't know who walks around my house saying, you got to pay that bill by this certain day. You got to get up and go to work today. How come you're still in bed? You got to get up today. Why haven't you gotten up? My wife doesn't even come and tell me that. My wife gets up and looks around the house, and what does she find? I'm gone. Right? Because I understand I have to get up and go to work. No one has to tell me. I understand the garbage can is full. I have to take it out. No one needs to keep telling me that the dog outside needs to be fed, because if I don't feed him, he's going to be dead. Right? Isn't that maturity?
Yes.
So what about church obligation? Why do people always have to be told? Because they're immature spiritually. Right? If you're seeking for sanctification, you're not going to be spiritually immature, are you? So why is church so important then? It helps us grow up. The government of the church is helping us grow up spiritually. Right? Education 260. I love this page, by the way. Ready for the next one? The church is organized for service. And in a life of service to Christ, connection with the church is one of the first steps. I love people who tell me that I've been Christian for years, I've never joined a church. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Because what does this say? One of the first steps of connection with Christ is connection to at least a church. You could be erroneous, you could be confused, but at least a church. How can we think we can be Christians and not be part of church? It says one of the first steps is what? Connection with the church. Ask Paul. When Paul had the scales on his eyes and he went there and the scales came off and he said, okay, what do you want me to do? What did they tell him? Go to the church. They'll tell you what to do. Right? Early converts, when everyone was converted, what's the first thing they told them? You need to go meet with the other Christians over there. You need to go to the church. And it says here, the church is organized for service, and in a life of service to Christ, connection with the church is one of the first steps. Loyalty to Christ demands the faithful performance of church duties. So loyalty to Christ demands the faithful performance of church duties. So far, I haven't found this as optional. Has anything I mentioned here about church relationship been optional if we claim to be a Christian? No. In fact, this is an important part of one's training. And in a church imbued with the Master's life, it will lead directly to effort for the world without. So, what is the important part of someone's training as a Christian? Well, to be faithful in your performance of church duties. And that will lead to work without. Right? You know, I always found it amazing. Some people, we've had discussions about people and when they're ready to join the church. People want to join the church. They've asked to join the church. And the first question I always get asked is, have they had all the studies? And I'm like, well, let's ask that question later. Because what we should be doing is looking at their fruits first. You won't really need to ask me that question if you saw all these fruits. You would just need to get some details about the studies. Right? We want to see fruits. And some things that I've noticed over the years is that when visitors come and they're so interested and they're so helpful. I mean, I've had visitors come and say, can you put me on the cleaning list? They're a visitor in the church and they want to come and clean the church. To me, I think that's somebody we ought to think about baptizing. What about you? Because half of the members we can't get here to clean the church. Right? But what did we just read? Loyalty to Christ demands the faithful performance of church duties. So if members were having trouble getting them here, we need to have a visit. And we need to talk to them about their loyalty to Christ. Because cleaning the church isn't to make the Bible workers' life easier. It's to show their loyalty to Christ. Right? Yes? Whatever it is. Whatever the duty is. That's right. Whatever the duty is. Acts of the Apostles, page 9, paragraph 1. It says here, the church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. Why are we organized?
Service.
And what are we supposed to be teaching everyone? Service. Is cleaning the toilet in the church missionary work?
Yes.
Yes. Why? You know, I have to tell you this. I got to say this, and it's not a boast to the local church I'm in, but I've had visitors come from different places in the world and come to our bathroom in our church and say, you know, these are some of the nicest bathrooms of any church I've been in. They're just tile. They're plain, but they're tile, but you know they're clean. They're spotless. They look new. So what should we do with our bathroom? Our bathroom should be a witness, right? Everybody's smiling and kind of looking, but where do you want to spend some personal time? In a nice, clean, spotless bathroom. What does that tell you about the building? When you go into a dirty bathroom, what does that tell you about the building? I know of some people who probably wouldn't visit a church again if they saw the bathroom dirty. Right? So if we're organized for service, what kind of service do we need to be doing? Anything and everything. And that's how church helps us learn, right? So the church needs to be organized, right? Getting back to this point of government. Can I erase this? Why is it so important that the church have a government? Well, we just talked about for our individual growth, yes? Right? For individual growth. But what about to carry out our mission? Is it important that the church be organized? Yes. That the fold be an organized one? Yes. Testimonies to Ministers, page 26, paragraph 2. Testimonies to Ministers, page 26, paragraph 2. And it says, as our numbers increased, it was evident that without some form of organization, there would be great confusion and the work would not be carried forward successfully. So early on, even Adventism understood they need to be organized. But did everybody agree with that? What, did they run into opposition? Yes. Why? Why? Because every organization they'd ever been a part of up until now was a mess. Right? All those other churches that perverted the gospel or perverted this or perverted that, they came out and said, we don't want any of that perversion. So what they did was they threw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater. You ever heard about that? You wash a baby in a basin, and now you have a baby laying in a dirty basin. You want to get rid of the dirty water, and you just throw it out, right? But what'd you throw out with it? The baby. We're supposed to be taking care of the baby. The main problem is not the dirty water. The main problem is the baby, right? Take care of the baby. So they decided, no, we need to organize. We don't get rid of organization because it's been so corrupted. We need to keep that so that we can nurture the baby, the church. Right? So you don't throw it all out. What you do is you organize correctly. So notice what it says. To provide for the support of the ministry, for carrying the work in new fields, for protecting both the churches and the ministry from unworthy members, for building church property and holding church property, for the publication of the truth through the press, and for many other objects, organization was indispensable. So what was that list? Support of the ministry. What else? Can't remember?
Unworthy members.
Protect from unworthy members.
Publication. Building property. Sharing the gospel to other people.
Publications. Opening new fields. Holding property. Did we miss one? Support of the ministry. Let's go back. Carrying forth the work in new fields, protecting the church and the ministry from unworthy members, holding church property, publication through the press, and many other objects. So let's look at these just for a minute. Support of the ministry. How do we pay the ministry? Tithe. If we didn't have a system of organization, how would we get the tithe? Consolidate it and then distribute it accordingly where it's supposed to go without organization. Could you do that? So then how do the other churches that don't have organization support the ministry? Local churches. You know the congregational system? The local church pays their local pastor. They also hire their local pastor. They also fire their local pastor. What's wrong with that system? Corruption. We only get a pastor we like. A pastor that only tells us the things we want to hear. So that adds us to protect from unworthy members and unworthy in the ministry too, right? Right? What about the unworthy members? How does system and order and government and organization protect from unworthy members? There's a system designed before we baptize anybody. They have to go through a process with a multitude of counselors. There is safety and wisdom, right? What about publications? How would we print publications that go around the world? There's some independent ministries who put out a lot of good publications. But you know what else they do? They put out a lot of bad publications too. You ever read any of them? Please don't. Because there's not a review board reading their publications to prove that what they're writing is true. Right? I mean, there's someone not far, we buy lots of books from them, but don't read their book on the Reform movement. No, it's a lie. It's all lies. We've gone down to talk to him. He refused to have a meeting with us. If he had a system of organization, they would have said, whoa, 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 whoa. Let us hear from you if he won't. Right? So you have to be careful. What about, that's why I do worry too, when people say, I'm reading this book and I'm reading that book, and I'm like, where'd you get all these books? Who reviewed those books? How do we even know what's true about those books? You got a good system that reviewed that and made sure that was truth and not error? Be careful. What about opening new fields? Would it be easy to open Angola without a worldwide organization that's funneling money and sending workers and doing everything to do that? How do you open new fields around the world in different places? What about holding property? Does Nashville Church own this property? Do they hold this property? No, the field owns this property. Why? There's a whole bunch of legal reasons why. It's a good protection to do it that way, right? We own it together. Therefore, there's more people involved in the process, right? So there's a lot of reasons the church needs to be organized. Why does Satan want to disorganize the church? Why would he prefer to have that previous board where all the Christians are just wandering? That's right. It impedes sanctification and carrying the gospel to the world. In volume 9, page 957, paragraph 2, it says that the spirit of pulling away from our fellow laborers, the spirit of disorganization is in the very air we breathe. Do you find that even in an organized church, there's always some spirit of disorganization. Always trying to upset the balance, right? By some, all efforts to establish order are regarded as dangerous, a restriction of personal liberty, and hence to be feared as popery. These deceived souls regard it a virtue to boast of their freedom to think and act independently. They declare that they will not take any man's say-so, that they are amenable to no man. But I have been instructed that it is Satan's special effort to lead men to feel that God is pleased to have them choose their own course independent of the counsel of their brethren. Satan would love nothing more than you to be listened to no one but yourself. Why? Because the heart is deceitful and wicked above all things. He knows it. He'd love you to pull away from the brethren. Become disorganized. You have your opinion as supreme. Notice what it says in volume 3, Testimonies for the Church, 446. It says that God wants His people to be united in the closest bonds of Christian fellowship. Confidence in our brethren is essential to the prosperity of the church. What's essential to the prosperity of the church? Not a lot of money, not a great Bible worker, not a good preacher. What's the most essential thing? Confidence in your brethren. And it says here that union of action is important in a religious crisis. Jesus would have His followers subject one to another, then God can use them as instruments to save one another. So God would have what? He would have us be subject one to another, then we could save one another. Right? And volume 9, 257 says this. Oh, how Satan would rejoice if he could succeed in his efforts to get in among his people and disorganize the work at a time when thorough organization is essential and will be the greatest power to keep out spurious uprisings and to refute claims not endorsed by the Word of God. Why is it that error can come in and take over a church? Why? Disunity and disorganization. You know, there's an organization in place to determined. If somebody brings a new idea, what are we supposed to do with that new idea? Just let everybody read it and study it and just share it in publications all over the fields, all over the world, all over the church? Is that the system? What's the system that God's put in place? It's supposed to be reviewed by the leadership, the brethren in leadership of experience. It's supposed to be examined closely to find out if it's truth. It's not just supposed to be shared. How could it be that a church that claims to be God's church, that has a doctrinal website, you could go to the doctrinal website and get 4 different doctrines on one subject and say the church doesn't really have a stand on these things? How could that be possible? It is in different churches, right? I forget the name of that place, but you could go to the website and say, I wonder what this church believes. You go to their website, they have 4 different things on one doctrine. And no clear-cut decision on what it is. What happened there? That church became disorganized. The organization fell apart. What does God want? What does Satan want now more than anything? Separation and disorganization. That's the Acts of the Apostles, page 164. To neglect or despise those whom God has appointed to bear the responsibilities of leadership in connection with the advancement of the truth is to reject the means that He has ordained for the help, encouragement, and strength of His people. For any worker in the Lord's cause to pass these by and to think that his light must come through no other channel than directly from God is to place himself in a position where he's liable to be deceived by the enemy and overthrown. So what does that say? If our judgment becomes supreme, we place ourselves in a very dangerous position, don't we? But not only that, notice this in volume 3, it goes on, talks a little further. Volume 3, page 66. We are living among the perils of the last days, and if we have a spirit of self-sufficiency and independence, we shall be exposed to the wiles of Satan and be overcome. It doesn't say may. What does it say? We shall be. So the spirit of independence, this is not good, is it? It puts us in a very dangerous position. And finally, Acts of the Apostles, page 163, God has invested His church with special authority and power which no one can be justified in disregarding and despising, for he who does this despises the voice of God. Wow. So now, the real question comes, where is His church then? Because if I see this, and this in another church, I have to despise, I have to not listen to it. Why? Because it's error, because it's wrong. Then that's another question. Is that God's church? You know, I had somebody approach me years ago. We went to some meeting somewhere, and they came and they told me, and they said, brother, what should I do? I've had all this tithe that I've been accumulating for years, and I don't want to give it to my church because they've done things that I think are wrong and this and that and the other, but you just came and gave a study on organization, and now what am I supposed to do with my tithe? Where should I send it in my church? And I said, sister, where you send your tithe, you should send your tithe wherever you're a member. Right? My question was, are you sure that you have your membership in the right place? There's no question where to send your tithe. Where do you send your tithe? Well, Nehemiah said the field, the church of your tillage. Where they till the ground, where you live. The real question comes not where do I send my tithe? Where am I? That's the question. Right? Now, if you're out there in no church, where should you be? And if you're out in the wrong church, where should you be? Because guess what? There's other sheep I have that are not of this fold. Does that mean they're not in any fold? Does that mean they're not in any fold? No, they might be in a fold, but guess what fold it is? It's the wrong fold. Because what is God's desire? One fold. There shall be one fold and one shepherd, right? In fact, there's a statement. Somehow I crossed over that. Hold on. Here it is. Desire of Ages, 8:21, paragraph 1. Simple sentence. Because if you understand John 10:16, you're going to understand this sentence. Desire of Ages, 8:21. All who believe are to be gathered into one church. Wow. What is that? What is the witness for Christendom in light of that statement? But what about all these thousands of Christian denominations? Is this God's plan? All who believe are to be what? And that church will be organized. It will be based on the system of truth, right? It will have government. All of these things, right? Because very close is the connection between the head and the body, right? I don't know anybody here who wants to cut their head off. What was Christ's prayer for his disciples, for everyone, in John chapter 17? John chapter 17, verse 21. We know the verse, right? That they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. When is the world going to believe in Christianity? When Christians are united, right? Are we supposed to give up truth, though, to become united? Is it possible to even do that? No, because we wouldn't be united. You can't give up the truth for that, right? You can't give up the truth for that. You know, in Revelation chapter 14, we always say that here's a simple test to see where God's church is. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. You know how many churches claim that? How many churches do that? How many churches, by their fruits, do you see that happening in their system of order, in the way that they do things, and all these things? How many churches do that? You know, it's an important thing that we become connected with Christ's church. You know, for those of us who never made a commitment to church, it's important. You can't be out there. He's calling you into the fold. Are you listening? Are you coming? You know, our subject was where the shepherd leads. Where does he lead? Into his fold. You know, and if you've made a commitment and you're in the wrong fold, is it important that you get in the right fold? How safe are you in the wrong fold? It's almost more dangerous to be out no fold at all than in the wrong fold. Why? It's almost more dangerous to be outside, to be in the wrong fold than to be in no fold at all. Right? Why? Well, because you get comfortable and think you're doing the right thing. You think that you're where you need to be, and you're not at all, right? So what should our individual diligent study be all the time? Truth. Understanding where Christ's fold is. You know, even if I'm in the fold that I think is Christ's fold, should I just say, okay, I've arrived, I'm done looking at it, examining it, and studying it? No. Why? They could go astray too, right? And what stops the church from going astray? The faithful members who are studying to understand and know, who put their hand and say, whoa, 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 this needs to stop. Right? We're all responsible to maintain the church, aren't we? If we haven't made a choice, we need to make a choice. And if we've made a choice, now you need to stand faithful to your choice. Right? Because it's a salvation issue, is it not? Jesus said, other sheep I have which are not of this fold. What will they do? They will hear his voice and they'll come. Do you hear his voice? Or is your voice louder than his? Is your opinion more important than his? Is what you think is right more important than what he thinks is right? Because, brethren, that's our greatest danger, isn't it? When we put our opinions and our attitudes above God, above his church, then guess what? We're in a very dangerous, dangerous place. We might not even know the danger. So I had to think about this person that I was driving behind, who had this bumper sticker. And they said, and then, all who wandered are not lost. And I really, really, really wanted to pull them over and ask them, do you know where you're going? Can I help you? Because your bumper sticker says you're wandering, and I'd like to help you get where you're going. But I didn't do it. But I wonder what the answer would have been if I stopped them and said, most people probably say, I don't even remember I have that bumper sticker on there. Right? But are you wandering? Are you aimlessly wandering? Are you lost? Or are you in a place where maybe you shouldn't even know you shouldn't even be? Do you hear his voice? Then what do you need to do? Obey. Come into the fold. Because this is where the safety is, right? May God help us to listen to his voice, not our voice, not other people's voices, but his voice. Because if I'm his sheep, I will hear his voice. Won't I? Amen. Amen.
Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or are interested in Bible studies, please write us at sdarmnashville@gmail.com or give us a call at 540-986-5858.